Some of you are probably wondering, wait a minute, those words sound familiar. People who sat in darkness have seen a great light. Haven't I heard this before? Surely we have. Just a few weeks ago on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, those same words were read in reference to the region of Galilee, the low-life neighborhood next door to the lower-life neighborhood of Samaria, where all upstanding, sophisticated Jews avoided. Yet it's important to consistently note that Jesus began his ministry in Galilee. Now, some of you might suggest that it makes sense to begin the ministry of those enlightened to others within the bleakest sections of our world. For centuries, for instance, Vermonters prided themselves as being the first slave-free state to enter the Union. But a closer look reveals that while most Vermonters rejected the institution of slavery, they also rejected the belief that Black Americans could live equally alongside them, and favored shipping us off to Liberia in West Africa to be their light among people unlike themselves who walked in darkness. To suggest that Jesus himself was a Galilean who began his ministry among other Galileans would be like suggesting that Jesus was an African American who began her ministry in Harlem. Religion remains a tool constructed and defined by financially and militarily powerful people in an effort to lure them away from what they may have once believed to their way of life under their God of life. In my first parish in Little Rock, Arkansas, I organized a citywide hike against hunger and routed the path in such a way that hikers would venture through neighborhoods they might otherwise avoid. This was apparent when I called the police department to provide public safety through each section of town. As I spoke on the phone to the officer in charge of coordinating security, I was urged not to walk through particular neighborhoods. When I asked why, he said, because it's the Black section of town. Now, obviously, he did not know who he was speaking to. So you can imagine how delighted I felt in introducing myself on the day of the hike. Such bias existed in Israel as well during the time of Jesus, especially among Jews about the region of Galilee. John's gospel says that Jews commonly held that no prophet could come from Galilee. And the nativity narratives go to great lengths to convince readers that Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea rather than Nazareth of Galilee, despite historical evidence that Mary and Joseph did not have to return to their ancestral home in Bethlehem to be registered in the Roman census during the reign of Emperor Augustus. Religion remains a tool constructed and defined by the financially and militarily powerful to convince everyone else to favor their way of life and to favor their God of life, unlike the way of Jesus. Jesus, who was most likely born and raised in Nazareth, and began his ministry among fellow low-life Galileans, called people away from their financially secure vocations as fishers that satisfied their physical needs to spiritual livelihoods where they could fish for people. And his only bait was simply the all-encompassing, compelling love of God that has no bounds and knows no divisions. We live in a nation and world where it matters where you come from. We redline our neighborhoods to prevent certain people from buying homes in them. We redline our borders to prevent certain people from crossing them. We redline our faith to prevent certain people from affecting our faith. And we redline our hearts to prevent certain people from changing them. But God, who looks upon the heart, is not changed. Jesus began his ministry in Galilee, amid Jews and Gentiles who intermingled, associated, and married one another in ways offensive to the more religious and racially pure Jews. It is that place where we prefer not to venture or live, where God most comfortably abides. Whether that place be a physical or spiritual dwelling, it is essential to our salvation that we find it, occupy it, live in it, so that we may truly live. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, and on them, says the prophet Isaiah, has light shined. It is only by abiding in God's sacred darkness that we are able to discern and, in fact, become God's luminous light. Amen.